There we go. Good morning. Welcome to our Municipal Council agenda for Tuesday, May the 3rd, 2022. I'd like to welcome everyone and call this meeting to order at this time. I'd like to ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will move along to our land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of Williams Treaty First Nation and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and the environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. I have some community announcements. I'd like to talk about the character community attribute for May is responsibility. I will be accountable for my actions, be reliable, and keep my commitments. A quote, character, the willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life, is the source from which self-respect springs. I have a couple of announcements on behalf of Council. Thank you to Councillor Persicini for once again leading Team EG in the Run for South Lake. It was a great event. Last week we attended the Volunteer Appreciation event, which was very well attended, and thank you to our staff and volunteers who organized it. I'm pleased to share information from York Region regarding the reduction of speed limits on regional roads in East Gwillimbury. Quite often we have requests from members of the public about speed limits in our community, and I'm pleased to talk about some of the roads that will be reduced. Yonge Street from Olive Street, Beckett Avenue to Queensfield Side Road reduced to 50 kilometers per hour. Doane Road from the second concession to Leslie reduced to 60 kilometers per hour. Mount Albert Road from Leslie to 100 meters east of Colonel Whaling Boulevard reduced to 50 kilometers per hour, keeping our roads safe for everyone. Are there any announcements from members of Council, please? I will start with Councillor Foster, then Councillor Persicini, and then Councillor Roy DiClemente. Go ahead, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good morning, everyone. I just wanted to quickly mention that our East Gwillimbury Car Show group will begin their events on May the 14th, and we're hoping for good weather. And again, that's in the Civic Center parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might ask if we could all put it in our calendars. We may not be at the first one, but it goes for several weeks, so making sure that we have it in our calendar and are reminded of it on a regular basis. Thank you very much. Councillor Persicini?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Madam Mayor, it may take a couple of minutes. I just have a couple of housekeeping to do. First of all, I want to thank everyone who participated and donated on the Team EG. It was a great event for the 2022 South Lake Run. And it was a beautiful day, sunshine everywhere, even in our hearts. And there was quite a few participants. We managed to raise $9,335. Thank you to everyone. And thanks to Gina for kind of coordinating everything and helping me out there. And Madam Mayor was there and Tara was there. We had a great time and the weather was good. Now, the second part is remind everyone that the charity Midway will be here at the Magnum Center at May the 11th to the 15th. 15% of all the ride that goes to South Lake, half Lake and half to Easter Seal split. I hope that the weather is good. There's rain like every other year in the past 2 years ago, and we can raise some money. And the most important thing this year is 100 years of Easter Seal. They're kind of celebrating 100 years that they started, and we're celebrating over 45 years. And I hope that everybody who I hate to ask everyone, but if you open up your heart and come out on Sunday, May the 25th, May the 29th at the Riverwalk 5K, 10K run, and raise money for Easter Seal. Every time you come out, you're helping, buy a pair of shoes, which could cost up to $500 for a kid because kids keep growing, and and send them to camp. So it's very important if you can come out as a team, just come out and have fun, and help Easter Seal kids. It's been a long, long time, 45 years for me, and raised over $3.5 million. Couldn't have done it without the support of the community, my friends, and all the sponsors and everyone involved. At the bottom of my heart, I thank everyone, and thank everyone who supports me, because without you, any events, without the people there, you need people. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Persicini, for all the work that you've done with Easter Seals as well. It certainly has made a difference for many of those young people who needed that extra support. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two quick ones. One is just a quick shout out to the Queensville Sharon Community Group on Saturday morning. They took advantage of our packages of garbage bags and gloves, and took care of 2 of our parks and a ditch, and cleared out. It had to have been at least 2 dozen bags of garbage that they picked up in the space of a couple of hours. So just wanted to shout out to our community group who were out beautifying our community. And then just wanted to ask folks to mark Saturday, June 18th on their calendars for the Friends of the East Gwillimbury Public Library's Shabby Chic fundraiser. It's back after a bit of a hiatus, and it is going to be bigger and better than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crone, announcements?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a couple. Wanted to thank the volunteers at the North Union Community Hall for their efforts in the pancake breakfast that we had a couple of weeks ago. It was so nice to see everyone back out again. It felt like things are slowly getting back to normal, and I think everyone was well fed. And secondly, I want to thank the folks that came out to collect community cleanup kits. Councillor Morton and myself were distributing them on the weekend, and thanks to everyone in Ward 3 that were helping to keep our community clean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other announcements at this time? Not seeing any, I will move along to deputations, item E, and we do not have any deputations at this time. And I will move down to item F, and under presentations, we have Lori Woodyatt, Executive Director, Sharon Temple here, National Historic Site and Museum, who's going to make a presentation for us. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have Lori on our Microsoft Teams call. Lori, you are muted. If you can unmute yourself and proceed with the presentation, please.
There, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, good morning, Madam Mayor, council members and staff. As Mayor Haxon pointed out, my name is Lori Woodyatt, and I am here representing both the Sharon Temple National Historic Site and the East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce. At last month's council meeting, you were presented with the request to close Judah Doan Way for proposed street festival. Excuse me. We have subsequently reassessed our plans and instead are requesting a permit to hold the community festival on the grass area adjacent to the Civic Center. And could we move forward to the diagram? So this is the layout for the event. It's August 7th. It'll be held from 11 till 4. If we start on the south end, the big star, that is the gate coming in from Children of Peace Park onto the temple grounds, and it will be open. And then you can see that virtually the entire Sharon Temple grounds will be filled with classic cars, bikes, etc., trucks. We will be having a barbecue, as we did last year, and an ice cream truck. And then if you move towards the north, you'll see the entrance onto our ground, pedestrian entrance, and where the cars come through. And our parking lot, the Timbers Hall parking lot, will be taken up with vendors and a sound stage for Highway 11 cruisers. And as you move over to the Civic Center, we have the Civic Center parking lot currently permitted, and that will be also filled with cars and trucks and bikes. And the area that we're here wishing to permit is the grass area on the far right-hand side, and this part of the event will be organized by the East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce. We are going to have a acrobike and skate performance. We will have a magician magic Mike. There'll be an art mural for community members to contribute to. There'll be bouncy castles and games and vendors. So that's sort of what I have. If anybody has any questions for me.
Questions for our presenter? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Ms. Woodyatt. Thank you for taking some time to come to us, Ms. Woodyatt, and share your plans for the event. I sort of had two questions, actually. One is wanted to understand a little bit about the parking for people who are not in the car show. So presumably this is going to be a large event, and it doesn't look like there is a space for someone who, you know, may want to take a drive down from Queensville or over from Mount Albert to partake. Where would they be parking?
Well, it's much like we did last year and what we've done at previous large events here at the temple is that, first of all, I'd like to mention that last year, which I don't really want to talk about, but I'll bring it up here, that, you know, we had probably 2,500 people in attendance. The cars that come onto the property bring about probably 75% of the foot traffic come with the cars. And last year we just used street parking, and Vince's has offered their parking lot to us, and you know, basically that was how we accommodated last year.
Okay, I guess my second concern then would be that this would be the second weekend in a row that we would be subjecting this area of Sharon, Beachboro, Leslie, Mount Albert Road, Vince's, the whole area, the second weekend in a row that we would be having this, because we've got Tapestry of Taste, which is the weekend before, also happening. So we've got 2 weekends of parking disruption and noise disruption for our residents. So I'll raise that as one issue, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Ms. Woodyatt?
Well, actually, this event is the week before Tapestry of Taste. So yes, there are 2 weekends, but I just wanted to point that out. And yes, it does cause community disruption. This event is on a Sunday from 11 to 4. So it's not like it's going on in the evening, which is going to cause noise concerns. There is no live music or anything like that. So it will cause, you know, last year there was some minor traffic disruption on Leslie Street, but it was, you know, it was nothing that we weren't able to handle. We have this year engaged with the York Region Amateur Radio Club, who for years did the parking control for our Canada Day event. And I've also had discussions with Councillor Morton about engaging members of the Legion to come out and help with traffic control and noise control and trying to make it as palatable as we can for the community.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DiClemente, any other comments, questions?
Not at this time, but I think Councillor Foster
I
had
see
his
that,
hand up.
yes. Thank you. Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Lori, you mentioned last year, and we know that was a bit of an issue. Has there been any thought given to pre-registration, so you have some sort of an idea of how many cars may be coming to be on display? I'm just looking at, you know, limited numbers in both lots that you have specified there.
Yes, Councillor Foster, we did do pre-registration last year, and pre-registration is already available for the cars right now. So yes, it will be, you know, notwithstanding what happened last year, which was a bit of an anomaly, there will be control over that this year. Last year on the Friday afternoon, we had approximately 450 cars, which could have been accommodated on the temple grounds. But, you know, we all know that that wasn't the way things stayed by the time Sunday came around.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions, comments? I guess for myself, I'm going to follow up a little bit on Councillor Roy DeClemente's as well. I'm just not sure how we accommodate parking for the public. And we know that these events are extremely well attended, and that's exactly what we want. But knowing that we have many cars that people are going to arrive in, and where exactly do we put them? I think I'm running through my mind is we have an arena not very far away, and that has a massive parking area, and I'm just wondering if we can take a discussion offline to talk about perhaps having people park there and transport them to the location and back again. While I know that the residents of Sharon are excited to participate and see how Sharon is really highlighted in our community, I'm sure that there are others that will not be participating, and we want to make sure that we're dealing with both those that are excited about it and those that will continue along their daily life on the weekend. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity that perhaps we can talk about some places where maybe cars can be parked and some shuttle. I'm also thinking of a couple of other locations as well that are within, I would say, no more than a 5-minute shuttle to the temple, and perhaps would just make things a little bit easier for all of our residents.
Yes, we can certainly look at that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Have you had the opportunity to speak with YRP regarding this event as well? I just think that because Leslie Street is pretty busy anytime, that we don't want to surprise them with backed up traffic and other problems as well.
I haven't thus far, but last year we had more than a handful of YRP officers actually attend the event, but I will reach out to them and talk to them about the proposed event.
They have a special events section, and I think it would be important. Better to give them a warning in advance than have a problem and them trying to scramble. They may put some pay duty people on, or some other individuals, to make sure that the traffic flow continues on both Leslie and on Mount Albert Road. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's a great idea to reach out to YRP for even just for traffic control, and maybe having someone on point duty just as the cars are arriving. I know that, as you said, Madam Mayor, while there may be some people who might not be happy about the disruption, and that's where I end up getting the phone calls. I do know that there's a significant number of people who would be really delighted to be able to partake in the event, and the amount of people who are available to walk to that event is also a factor as well. I guess what I might suggest a little bit further to your comments, Madam Mayor, is just to hear back from our own staff to make sure that what is proposed here meets the conditions and provisions of our permitting process. So as long as the permit is, they're following the guidelines of our permit process, and they're working with our staff, given that this is our facility and our property, then I'm comfortable to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you read my mind. I was thinking the very same thing about having parking options at the sports complex. I think that makes a lot of sense. I would explore to make sure we don't have any events going on there at the same time. I think we want to set this event up for success and make sure that it's as good as possible. And better to have more parking than have too few. So I think that's worth exploring. I second your idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? I'm not seeing any. Lori, I might suggest that perhaps there be a staff meeting perhaps it's already planned, just with some of to address some of the details that have been discussed here this morning. I know it will be successful. You had a very successful car show last year, and I'm sure that everybody will be out to see this one as well, probably many more. People are ready to get out into the community and enjoy nature again, and I think it will be busy. So whatever we can do to help make it as streamlined as possible, staff and council are there for you to make sure that we have a wonderful day. And I expect that probably you will reach out at some point or another that we can do a few more details if there's last minute. Certainly count on us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
With that, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone, Councillor Roy DiClemente, all those in favor? And that's carried. We'll move along to our adoption of minutes. And we have one set of minutes from April 20th. Be it resolved that Council adopt the Council minutes from the meeting held on April 20th, 2022. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Morton, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Item H is administration, and I will ask Mr. Webster to come forward at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good morning. Today I have two updates. One is dealing with, on Friday, Bruce McGregor and the CAO of York Region hosted the annual York Region Leadership Training and Development Symposium, which is attended by York Region senior staff, York Region Police, and all 9 municipalities as well. Dr. Linda Duxbury was the guest speaker this year, and it was a very interesting morning spent talking about the post-pandemic challenges and opportunities that face municipal service providers. So it was an excellent session, and I think all attendees enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Secondly, I would like to pass it to Deputy Mark Velchich, who has a COVID update on a few topical matters. So Deputy Velchich.
Thanks, Mr. Webster, and Madam Mayor, through you, good morning. Just a very brief update, just to let you know that as we kind of emerge with the pandemic situation, just to let you know that last week, the region of York formally lifted their state of emergency. As you know, the town has done that a number of weeks ago. So we're starting to see Richmond Hill and Vaughan followed shortly thereafter. So starting to see these COVID management practices move to what we call a more operational mode from emergency response mode. Just want to let you know as well, just checking some notes here, York Region Public Health is continuing to stay very active, involved in COVID response. The health unit EOC, though, has been also demobilized, and they've moved to a more operational mode. So the health units are basically now dealing with any sort of COVID-related matters in sort of a similar operational fashion that they would with other health-related matters. I believe the region's final official Emergency Operations Center meeting is actually tomorrow, but just wanted to let you know that we're continuing to see municipalities move to operational means of continuing to deal with any related COVID responses. So that's the brief update I have for you today.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of council to Mr. Velchik? I'm not seeing any at this time. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Carruthers, all those in favor? And that's carried. We're at item I on our agenda, and that's Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services with General Manager Molinary.
Mike, do you mind if I introduce this one today?
Please.
Sure. Madam Mayor and Council, this is a follow-up, an important follow-up to our growth management workshop that we hosted and held as a council session on Tuesday, April 12th. And council will recall there was a lot of discussion about the urgency of the lagoon decommissioning, of the requirements for the province to make a timely approval of the Upper York and other infrastructure, and as well as some new technology that might assist in all of those aspects. And we were directed to roll up our sleeves, and it largely lies in the CIS area, Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services, which General Manager Mike Molinari leads. And today he has an update presentation, as well as a part of this will be a presentation on this technology that's been put in place throughout North America, but in particular the St. Thomas example. And so I'll pass it over to Mike Molinari for today's presentation and update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. Mr. Molinari, go ahead.
Thanks,
please.
Tom. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Madam Mayor. So we do have a presentation for you today. This is an update from our growth management presentation that was provided previously. And today's presentation will look at residential and non-residential capacity and the servicing gap to the Upper York servicing solution. We'll also provide a detailed overview of potential technology that could be used to assist with servicing that gap. And we have Brad Gaffney with us today from Nuterra. And Nuterra is a manufacturer of prefabricated treatment plants that's based out of Brockville, Ontario. And finally, we'll provide council with some follow-up recommendations based on the draft recommendations that we provided to council at the growth management workshop. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So when the Sustainable Development Incentive Program was approved in 2014, it included a cap of 1,240 meters cubed per day for new non-residential development going forward. So that cap is based on water consumption, and it assumes that the water used at the development will be the resulting sanitary flows from the development. So water in equals water out. So only the only the non-res properties that outlet to the YDSS are included in the cap. So what that means is that developments on private services such as septic tanks, etc., or for instance, properties in Mount Albert that are not on the YDSS are not included in that overall cap. So the limit has not been problematic until very recently. About 7% of the available flows have been allocated since the start of the SDIP program in 2014 until now. So it's really has been very, has not been very problematic at all until very recently. But recently, we've received a number of large-scale non-residential developments, such as the HELP Woodbine 1, and those two on their own have consumed approximately 50% of that available capacity. So there's also been a significant increase in the number of non-res applications, and the remaining capacity is quickly being consumed. So, you know, the town was recently listed as one of the as the highest growth municipality in Canada. And along with that has also, we expect has also come some non-residential inquiries. So there's a lot of interest in coming to the town and non-res especially coming to the town. So the bottom line is that additional sanitary capacity is going to be required to accommodate the non-residential development demand. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the table shows the non-res developments that were implemented through the SDIP program from 2014 to 2022. So essentially includes Lowe's Plaza, some schools, Vince's, and really is about 8 years worth of development activity in the town. And again, represents 7% of the total non-res flows that are available. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the proposed developments that are anticipated or in progress that are expected to consume much of the remaining non-residential servicing capacity. We expect that the 1240 cubic meters per day cap will be consumed approximately within the next 3 to 5 years. So this list is our preliminary list. It's based on theoretical flows. So it could expand or shrink depending on what the actual flows from these facilities ends up being. So we're hopeful that, you know, we tried to be conservative, but we feel there's still some movement to allow a few extra developments to come on this list. But for right now, this is kind of what we feel comfortable as being achievable with the available flows that we have. Next slide, please. This table shows the magnitude of development that could potentially be impacted in the future by the cap. So some of the developments, such as the first one on the list, the Redwood development at Yonge and Green Lane, they're proposing private plants. And as a result of that, they're not going to impact the 1240 cap or be constrained by the UISS. The other developments on the list, many of them will require or are anticipated to use the municipal system and would be subject to that 1240 cap. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the SDIP cap will impact the town's ability to proceed with development in roughly the 2026 timeframe and beyond, unless we have additional capacity or an alternative solution is implemented. So the town has about 1,000 units of unallocated reserve that could be redirected, but we note that additional residential allocation is also required for the 2025-26 timeframe. So both of those streams, the residential and the non-residential, both seem to be becoming problematic in around that 25-26 timeline. So we also understand that from the region that the earliest the Upper York could be commissioned is 2029, and that's assuming that the EA is approved imminently. So this leaves us a gap on both the res and the non-res sides of approximately 3 to 4 years, and highlights the need for a strategy and a new innovative solution. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? So at a high level, there's lots of different options to accommodate this. So we come up with 3 or 4 ideas that we've come up with that could potentially address this issue. So the first, as a full interim solution, the lagoons could be replaced with a treatment facility, similar to the one shown in the graphic. So Brad Gaffney will be providing some more details on this technology and the concept design of the plant that could potentially be used at the lagoon site as part of his presentation in the next section. In order to proceed with one of these plants, we note that there's administrative approvals that need to be overcome, especially with the lagoon site, because the ECA environmental compliance approval, which is basically the paperwork that sets out what the facility is allowed to do, its limits, and some of its overall characteristics. That ECA is for the lagoons is to be transferred to the Upper York sewage solution in the future. So if we were to install a new plant at this location, that ECA we'd basically be adding one extra step. The ECA would move from the lagoons to the plant, the interim plant, and then from the interim plant to the Upper York. So it's basically following the same thing. It's just that one extra step that would have to be added into the overall process. And in the interim, the ECA would also have to permit additional flows to accommodate the res and the non-res, and thus bridge the gap to the UISS. So currently, those are 2 very critical pieces that would have to be put in place to make this a viable solution. So the MECP or the minister could potentially provide those approvals as part of their approval for the UISS. So a second potential option as a partial solution is to allow developers to install individual private treatment plants for condominium and non-res site plans. And that's, again, similar to the one proposed by Redwood Properties at Yonge and Green Lane. So that option solves the allocation issues on a site-by-site basis, but is not an overall solution. So it's kind of a one-off solution for each of the individual properties as they come in. So each of those installations requires approval by the town and the MECP, and Mr. Gaffney can offer their experience in working with their clients to facilitate these. A third potential solution, as noted previously, is to hold the 100 or the 1,000 units of residential reserve and reallocate some or all of it to non-res. This would almost double the amount of non-residential flows available through the SDIP program. So that would certainly buy us a little more time to be able to stretch what we have. But however, we note that that we also have the residential side that is also constrained. So that is a solution, but we don't feel that it's necessarily going to bridge the gap completely from where we are now to where we want to be. And finally, a fourth potential solution is to install additional inline storage solutions similar to the one that the Sharon group of developers is in the process of designing and implementing. And that also has an ability to extend our servicing capacity. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'll pass it over to Brad Gaffney from Nuterra, and he can provide an overview of their plant technology and its potential applications. So Brad, over to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Council and Madam Mayor, for having me here today. My name is Brad Gaffney with Nuterra. Nuterra is a water treatment and solutions provider. We've been providing water treatment solutions for a variety of applications globally for a number of decades now. I'm here today to talk a little bit about decentralized water. Nuterra's manufacturing facilities located in Brockville, Ontario. We have 2 other facilities in the US as well. One in Heber Springs, Arkansas, which does our pressure vessel type treatment for drinking water applications, mostly municipal drinking water vessels for carbon and PFAS treatment removal. We also have a facility in Minnesota that does surface aeration for lagoons and that sort of treatment. And then we have stormwater as well, and a number of other verticals within the group treating different types of water. Just some history on Nuterra. We've been founded in '92 out of Brockville, Ontario, and through acquisitions, we've acquired some companies that focused on different verticals within the water sector, giving us a bit of a legacy of installations dating back to the 1800s. We have about 22,000 installations in North America, and we have over 3,000 globally in addition to that. Today, I was going to focus specifically on decentralized wastewater, and if we could go to the next slide, please. So what is decentralized wastewater treatment plant? And essentially, the next slide depicts some of the spectrum of types of treatment that you'd be used to. So if we go to the next slide. The left side is really what would be most dominant in North America, water treatment that's centralized. You have cities that have a main wastewater treatment facility. You've got homes and collection systems that bring that wastewater and sewage to the wastewater plant. And then on the other side, we have residential, more rural type applications where you have a septic system treating a single home. In the middle, there's the communal or decentralized application where you're treating multiple homes or commercial applications on site rather than trying to, if there's no opportunities, to bring it to a centralized location. And over the years, we've seen a tremendous shift in this need because of just the expansion of city centers, moving outside of the infrastructure for the piping for the centralized option, and regulatory requirements tightening on the residential side. So septic systems not being as good a quality of water, impacting our groundwaters for future generations. If you can go to the next slide, please. This kind of just elaborates a bit more on what the last slide was. So on the left side, we have the large regional treatment. You can see the big tanks and extended aeration type technology. treating a large city center from 10,000 people or hundreds of thousands of people to millions of people with a large network of infrastructure. And then on the right side, we've got the in-ground septic tanks with typically an effluent bed that's buried, that's leaching the treated water down into the ground. And as you can see, there's a middle gap where we have a flow range in the, say, 20 homes or 20 cubic meters per day, roughly, to anywhere from 4,000 cubic meters per day to 10,000 cubic meters per day. And there's a bit of a gap between the support of these technologies. And with the regulatory requirements, this is where Nuterra has chosen a technology called MBR. And if we can go to the next slide. The types of treatments that you see in that middle section it can range from commercial, industrial, through to small municipal developments, small hamlets, and then private development where there's a housing development going in that that needs sewage treatment for 500 homes, but there is no infrastructure to get that to a centralized location. So all of these range of applications are very well suited to MBR technology. Next slide, please. So there are a number of technologies out there, extended aeration, MBBR, SBR. These are all acronyms I'm throwing at you, but essentially the difference between any aerated biological treatment sewage plant and MBR is the M in MBR, which is the membrane, which is a physical barrier between the environment and the sewage and the pathogens. Next slide, please. The process is really in three main steps. It can be broken down. The left side, we start with equalization. So you flush the toilet or showers and that sort of use. You have an equalization stage. And in that stage, we're doing removal of toiletries, so some screening. We're removing toiletries or anything that gets flushed down the toilet that's more of a non-organic solid that needs to be removed and put into waste management. The remaining liquids and solids are put into an equalization tank that surges up and down and meets the flows, demand flows for morning and evenings and afternoons as demand goes up and down. And it's really to balance the flow, and they're designed based on the flow of the system. The next stage is where the biological reactor is actually taking a natural process of microorganisms breaking down the sewage into smaller components, into more of we call it a mixed liquor, but it looks like a consistency of chocolate milk. And what we're doing, you see the bubbles in there, we're putting oxygen in the water and we're oxygenating and promoting the biological growth. So within that, there's a very broken down sewage consistency that gets transferred to the last stage, which is the membrane filtration. With the membrane filtration, we're physically putting a barrier between the environment and the sewage. And that membranes, they're an ultra filter. And what it does is only allows water to pass through the filter because the hole size is so small. So we put a small vacuum and we essentially suck the clean water out of that consistently looking chocolate milk mixture we call mixed liquor. And it's a very high concentrated mixed liquor, which allows us to operate at very small footprints compared to traditional technologies that you see at extended aeration plants or even traditional wastewater plants for cities. Sorry, next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of what that membrane looks like on the right side. You can see the membrane is a Z-Weed 500 is the model, the type. It's a ultra filter with 0.04 microns. So you can see the arrow coming off of that to a small little dot, just to give you a bit of a perspective of how small those hole sizes are compared to the other bacterias and combustible particles and organic compounds and pathogens that we don't want in our water. It provides that physical barrier, and that's really why we've seen a lot of success over the last 2 decades with the Ministry of Environment putting regulatory requirements into some of these decentralized treatment facilities where a subsurface septic system isn't suitable. It won't reach the limits that you will get with a membrane technology. The advantage of the membrane is you also produce a quality of effluent that's drinking water quality that could be used for discharge to surfaces rather than putting into subsurface. So lakes and rivers, oceans, streams, dry ditches, wetlands are all acceptable locations to discharge this very clean water. In many cases, the water is cleaner going into those locations than it is that's in there. The next slide, please. This is just a look at, I mentioned the chocolate milk mixed liquor that looked in that last tank where the membrane is. That's on the left side. That's essentially what it looks like. And then we pull through the membrane and you get a very clean effluent quality of water. When you're looking at the constituents breakdown, these are some of the things that the environment's concerned about, that we should be concerned about, and the ministry is watching for and protecting the environment of. The biological oxygen demand, which is really a measurement of how much dissolved oxygen is required to treat that water. There's total suspended solids. These are particulates that are in the water, total organic nitrogen, total phosphorus. These are all very important parameters, usually aligned in an ECA. And we can meet and exceed typically, well, we meet and exceed all of these with a membrane filtration. It doesn't vary site by site because some wastewater is fairly consistent, but if you're working with a commercial application versus a domestic water, the strength might be higher in the commercial because there's less water use, or it might be more in the domestic. With a membrane technology, it really doesn't matter if you have a 200 BOD or 400 BOD, your effluent is still less than 5 milligrams per liter because of that physical barrier that I talked about earlier. If there's any questions as I go through this, feel free to jump in and I can answer them as we go, or we can hold them for the end, whatever everyone wants. Next slide, please. The advantage also I mentioned on the MBR technology is footprint. A lot of times with developments, private developments, there's a real estate premium. They're trying to develop that property for either homes or commercial properties or recreational areas. And being able to have a smaller footprint, membrane technology gives you that option because of that concentrated mixed liquor. We can really reduce the footprint. It's really almost a third the size of any traditional technology. Next slide, please. Our approach, I probably should just jump into the next slide, is a bit of a multi-step process. The decentralized area that I talked about as being our focus. You're working with developments that need to be scaled. Potentially down the road, they want to add, initially 500 homes, then they're going to go to 1,000 homes or 1,500 homes, or it's a commercial development that, initially the plaza is not fully populated, but in 3 years it'll be fully populated. Those types of applications are very well suited to scalability and pre-configured, pre-built modular treatment systems. And MBR allows you to build in building blocks to that extent where you can bring in the treatment system over a period of time as needed. Next slide, please. There's a bit of a spectrum there as well that we offer that can be offered with an MBR. On the left side being completely containerized and turnkey package. It arrives on site and you have really three things that you need. You need the influent, so the wastewater coming from the toilets. You need the line that goes out to the lake or the river or the ditch or the stream, and then you need power. And everything else is completely inside the modular building. Then you go for the other side where it's more of a municipal or a prefabricated building, or maybe there's our existing infrastructure and you're bringing the equipment in loose skids and they're already pre-factory tested and all the advantages of factory built equipment, but they're on skids and they have a little bit of connection between the skids once it gets to site. And then the hybrid in the middle is essentially decoupling the tanks. So instead of having the tanks within the modular building, you can have them as external. You can see the larger tall tanks as, you know, bolt together tanks, or even below grade fiberglass reinforced plastic tanks. Next slide, please. Pre-engineering is also another advantage of the MBR technology in many ways, because you can pre-build and pre-design the different types of flows and ranges, allowing you to hit all the effluent quality requirements that the Ministry of Environment requires. Next slide, please. So through modularity and engineering design concepts, we were able to, you know, we've developed over years of building these systems, building blocks that allow us to piece together different configurations. In this case, I'm just showing a number of, just a range of flows that you can get with very easily with an MBR. So starting with the model ST35, it's 35 cubes per day, and it can range up to the model 900, which is about 900 cubes per day. But being a configurable pre-engineered system, you can also go above that and beyond that with modularity of other building blocks. So, you know, whether it's 4,000 cubic meters or 4,000 homes, or 10,000 homes. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of some of the different configurations that we've seen. The top left being, you know, a modular building on top of a concrete tank, in-ground tank. The one to the right of that is an above grade fiberglass reinforced plastic tank. And then where it's sometimes seasonal applications, we will have those, or it's temporary. Below, on the bottom left, we've got some bolt together large tanks. And as you can see, the one on the right is more of a all-encompassed tanks built inside the actual modular building for a complete turnkey solution. Next slide, please. And I mentioned the tanks, I won't elaborate this in too much more, but the fiberglass reinforced plastic tanks on the left side, these are essentially turnkey tanks in the way that they can arrive on site with all the internals. So there's aerators inside, there's instrumentation inside, there's section walls partitioned for the different zones. So we have equalization and sludge storage and aeration, pre-anox and post-anox, all these different zones, all built within a tank, pre-factory built, arrive. From a construction standpoint, it's essentially earthworks of removing, putting a hole in and putting some interconnecting piping between that tank and the modular building that arrives shortly thereafter. So an installation of something like this can happen typically within a week. We are fully operational from, assuming the site power is on site and you have a collection system for bringing the sewage in and a discharge line for the sewage out. The modular plant essentially arrives pre-tested and ready to go. And then you can hook up those connections and we're operating in a week. Next slide, please. And this is just more on the train of thought around prepackaged, pre-built, engineered system versus sort of an on-site build or construction. The advantages of the modularity and the process design up front. You have the installation of number of systems over the years that allow you to perfect, but to continue to refine and iterate the process. And then from an engineering and technology standpoint, we have an in-house team that can provide that design customization if there's any facades or things that the site conditions would require. That's all taken care of in the technology and engineering team. And then they work closely with the manufacturing group to build the equipment so that it's built inside a factory in a controlled environment under quality controlled program. So you have checklists and work instructions and procedures for executing the build. And then obviously the commissioning and installation, the same team is helping with the installation and training of the equipment or the operators of the equipment. And that can all happen within a very controlled environment and a time frame. Next slide, please. Comparing field erected systems to prefabricated, some initial cost is really the because everything's wrapped into that equipment build, there's really little site installation requirements, and the installation cost is built into those designs. Overall, total project cost is lower. Safety's a higher controlled environment. You really have very little site installation work, which can also cost quite a bit when conditions are varied and you have different groups of contractors working together that aren't necessarily familiar with wastewater treatment plants and the codes and regulations around it. Next slide, please. This is the factory in Brockville. Just it's about a 3-acre facility. We bring in containerized buildings, skids in the back end, and from there they get civil and customized to the site, and then built with mechanical, electrical. They're factory certified, so they have a UL, a MET certified panels and building certification. So when they do arrive, they're pre-certified, so you don't have to worry about inspections. In locations where the screen room is, I mentioned like the equalization tank, that's a classified location, so it's, it has to be certified to a certain codes, national standards for Canada and the US. And then we pre-build and pre-test everything in that factory before it ships and gets put on a truck and arrives to site for installation. Next slide, please. Again, this is the inside. Because of the large facility, we're able to build these systems and put them together and test them all in one spot. It allows for a much better quality control environment, teams that work together, and multidisciplinary teams that work together and on a regular basis building water equipment, which is also a great advantage. Next slide, please. Because the MBR technology uses an aerobic process, we're injecting oxygen and air into the wastewater. It doesn't produce a septic odor. We don't have a septic situation. We don't work with septic sewage. It's an aerobic sewage. And in the screen room is probably the only location where you would have potential for a more of an earthy smell. And we use carbon vessels to treat that. So we put those black drums you can see there. This is a small room that exchanges about 12 air exchanges of the room per hour. And we put that air through carbon, so the effluent air that's coming out of the building is clean and doesn't have any odor to it. Next slide, please. Containerized buildings, we've had to get clever over the years with the way that these are put together, and as well being able to consider operation and maintenance being a key component. We operate these plants in some situations for our remote areas, but we also service them ourselves. So being able to have that feedback and improve the way that pumps and blowers or replacement of transmitters and things, that's all part of the consideration of the design, that pre-engineered piece that I talked about. You can see the membranes on the right. These are accessible for being able to open the door inside a controlled environment. In the middle of the winter, you don't have to pull this outside. You're in a controlled environment. You can open the door after you've drained the tank and do an inspection and check and make sure everything is working as it should. Next slide, please. And then further than, once the system is at site and working, installation and training, retraining if there's a change in operators, we offer that. But there's also, that ongoing support. So being able to have parts and pieces replaced, aftermarket service for doing any type of replacements if there's any issues, or troubleshooting and working with the operators for any questions that they may have during the operation of the plant. Next slide, please. Part of that solution, we offer a telemetry type package that is web-based, allows you to securely access the plant and be able to control the system remotely. You have full visibility on the KPIs of the system. The operators can see all their important parameters to operate the plant. The daily status report would be sent by email, text message and alarming as live as they happen. you can have access to all the manuals and information for replacing parts and pieces to build the materials. So making it all easy and centralized in one place to simply continue long operations of these plants for decades. Next slide, please. And this is a demonstration we actually had at our facility. We had the sewage plant. We had bathrooms in the facility being treated. The users were, we treated the sewage that the factory was producing and went through a small, you can see the little RO there, treating the water to a drinking water standard. And then it came up to the waterfall and a drinking fountain. And the next slide, we had our leadership team. Sorry, you can go to the next slide. They drank the water. It's the water quality coming out of this is better than as good as drinking water is. Next slide, please. I just have a couple quick slides on just some installations in Ontario. So just a quick note on ECAs. So environmental compliance agreements. We have about 23 in process, or 23 in all stages. 16 are in plants are in operation. The other ones are in the process of approval. We've never been denied approval for an ECA because of the membrane technology is all we use. The ministry has actually, we've had situations where we've had, I guess, leads or people come to us because they've been recommended by the Ministry of Environment. This one is a community resort in the Muskoka, and it's painted green because they wanted it kind of in the background of their beautiful resort, kind of back up on the hill, and blended in with the trees. And they're discharging to a very, very clean lake. There's about 150 cubic meters per day, treating this beautiful resort right on the water. Next slide, please. This one is actually a large recreational facility in Fort McMurray, Alberta. It was called Mack Island Park. It's actually for a fairly large size complex with pool and indoor facilities and for recreational purposes. This system was a new the whole facility was a new installation, and we provided the sewage treatment for that. It's about a 228 cubic meter per day plant. I think that's very similar to the HELP system. Next slide, please. This was a small 12 cubic meter per day demo that we did in Peterborough, looking at nitrate and nutrient removal. And we did a bit of a facade. It was there for a few years running as a demonstration plant. Next slide, please. This is a mobile home community in Conscon, Ontario. It was it's treating a park, an RV park, and discharging into Lake Ontario. There's a small inlet in Lake Ontario that it's almost the wetlands that we're discharging to. They had a failing septic bed, and this replaced the septic bed and allowed them to expand their facility and turn the bed into a. Sorry, any questions? Next slide, please. This is the Southwold Township plant. This is a 1,200 cubic or 500 cubic meter per day plant, expandable to 1,200. So it's not running at full capacity, but essentially this is down in the valley, and it's the housing development is above. There's a plan for 500 homes. They're about half capacity at this point, I think. And all of these plants I've been talking about have the same process. So they have that screening room, they have the equalization tanks and the aerobic process and the membrane treatment. And then the discharge is going to a stream to the right side of the plant. And you can see a backup generator is there as well. So this plant is a year-round facility that's being operated by Aqua. Next slide, please. This is just a sample of, just to give you an idea of a modular building or skidded mount equipment that goes into a pre-built or prefabricated building, like a Butler building. This is for the Quinte West in Ontario, just at the Belleville. They're treating a number of homes and condominiums, and the water is being discharged to Lake Ontario. Next slide, please. Another example in Gananoque. This is for a marina. It's about 33 cubic meter per day. There's a restaurant and a number of just commercial buildings that are treating water from the boats. The boat line as well dumps their sewage into the tanks, holding tanks, and we process that as well. And the water goes into the same lines. Next slide, please. And this one's been running for almost, I guess, 12, 13 years now. It's actually in Brockville. It's a 30 cubic meter per day plant treating condominiums, a hotel, and a number of homes. And it's only 13 meters away from that house that you can see the dots there, arrow to, just to point out that there's no odor, there's no noise. It's very discreet treatment facility and a very compact footprint. Next slide, please. So this is the proposal we put together just regarding the feasibility of a lagoon replacement with an MBR and what it could look like. Essentially, you're looking at a 40 by 127 foot footprint of above grade buildings, modular buildings, and then you'd have some in-ground FRP tanks that would be doing the equalization and the aeration that I talked about earlier. There's 3 biological trains in this design, so allowing you to modularly build this out in 3 phases if needed or all at once. It has on-site sludge dewatering, which allows you to, as you process sewage through the membrane process, you do collect a sludge that we dewater and decant down on smaller flow systems. But when you get into higher flow systems, it makes more sense to treat those solids on site. So what we do is we dewater that mechanically with a dewatering system, and it produces essentially a dry cake that can be landfilled. Next slide, please. I think that actually is the end of our slides. So I'm open for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gaffney. You've taken something that seems very complicated and presented to us something that becomes very simple. And I thank you very much. It's been a wonderful presentation. I, as you know, was one of the people that went to St. Thomas in the fall and saw this facility in operation. So I won't be asking questions of you, but I know that there are members of council here that have many questions. So I will ask if there's questions at this time. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was, through you to Mr. Gaffney, that was a very impressive presentation, very detailed, and notwithstanding your description of the process, you've probably ruined chocolate milk for me for a while. I have a few questions. What is typically a lifespan of one of these operations?
That's a good question. So the membranes themselves, they can last anywhere from 10 to 15 years. We have some in operation for 20 years. There is a warranty period of 7 that's derated. But the system itself, the equipment, pumps, blowers, and that sort of thing, there is a maintenance schedule that would be provided with the system on that, and it does vary a little bit by component, but the life of the facility would be decades.
And so jumping through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Gaffney, jumping off that concept of maintenance, what sort of backup systems do you have in place? Of, worst case scenario, something breaks down, you have to shut it down. What's the, you can't ask everyone in a community to stop flushing their toilets. What's the backup contingency that you would use?
Yeah, it does depend on the site and the site conditions. So as you've seen on the one for Talbotville, there was South Holt County, there was a generator there ensuring that you have continuous power. There's a number of redundancies built within the facility, and all those, the engineering design is built so that, if there is a failure, we have full capacity to operate the plant on the other side. We have replacements that are on the shelf for criticals if there is anything. to make sure that the plant continues to run. The goal is to not bypass the plant because, in the end, we're trying to protect the environment, and having a bypass is not ideal. Now, in a situation where you have an opportunity to divert the sewage to an existing system that could handle the overflow for a period of time, like you have at the lagoon situation, or sorry, at the, I guess it'd be the lagoon situation. That would be a situation where you could save potentially on some capital costs by not having the redundancy built into everything that you would typically have where you are standalone and can't have those downtimes.
Okay. And through you, Madam Mayor, you mentioned that you had about 16 plants in operation. I was just curious, what was the largest plant you have in operation in Ontario, and how many homes would that service?
The Southfield one is 500 homes. There's in Ontario, I think 500 cubic meters per day is our largest. We have a 1,500 cubic meter per day plant in Alberta. We have another 1,500 cubic meter plant overseas in Zambia, Africa. So those are some of the larger facilities. But essentially the plant itself is modular in the sense that although it's 1,500 cubic meters per day, it's not one plant, it's multiple plants within that plant that are operating to that stage. So by adding another train and building it to the size you need, you're really just repeating the design.
Sure. Okay, and so one last question, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Gaffney. Because you do have a few of these in operation, I'm led to believe that the Minister of the Environment is familiar with your operation and they have some degree of comfort with it, which I think is good. What other than when it comes to the output, so the treated water, other than if putting it into the stream, so for us, the Holland River, I can understand how some people or our neighbors might object to that. Is there any alternative to diverting the output to any place other than another water source? Do you have any other communities that divert their water, the treated water, elsewhere than a lake, a pond, or stream, whatever?
Yeah, so obviously a subsurface discharge is an option. We do that we have 2 facilities right now that are doing that in a subsurface application. So it's a traditional bed, but it'd be a shallow bed, distribution piping underground to absorb. There's no receiver available to discharge that water.
Like a septic bed?
A septic bed. But obviously there's a cost for that infrastructure and land use. If you can avoid it, it's obviously preferred, but from a cost standpoint, but it is an option for sure.
Okay, thank you. That's no more questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and thank you to staff for pursuing this. This is it's very exciting. As you know, the residents of Holland Landing have been dealing with the smell coming off the lagoons for decades. And I listened very carefully to your presentation on anything to do with odor. And I just want to have a few more assurances from you that there would not be any odor. With the lagoons, it's not a constant smell. It's something that happens when they turn over every now and again. So even the occasional smell would not be an improvement on what we have. So I just wanted to find out from you, Mr. Gaffney, is if there's any odor coming at any point in time. You talked about sludge dewatering. Does that produce an odor? Would there be any odor that the residents would experience from this at any point in time?
No, there is not. The screen room I mentioned up front, where you have those black drums, that's carbon. That is the really only source point of odor, and that is in a very small room that's controlled, and that is done through media vessels. Everywhere else is aerobic process, so there is no off-gassing. Everything's in containerized tanks, or even the sludge treatment. It's aerobic as well, so it's an earthy smell, and it's actually, because it's aerobic, but it's also containerized in a room with ventilation. So there is no odor.
Thank you. And there's also a comment about if there was a breakdown, what would happen, and that you'd mentioned that we could use the lagoons as a redundancy. I'm sure that would then produce an odor. So wondering about, and maybe this is more a question for Mr. Molinari, I believe the lagoons are hooked up to the sewage system currently. There just isn't capacity, but would we be able to discharge into that if something broke down for a short period of time?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's my understanding. They recently made some improvements that provided some flexibility to be able to do that. But as Mr. Gaffney has mentioned, their system is modular. So even if you had an issue with one of the modules, you would still have other modules that were working to be able to facilitate that. And one other piece that I think the council would find very interesting is we had a discussion yesterday about these units and resale value, and there is a market for these units, because the town is really looking for this as an interim basis. There is a market for these as a second hand. So even if this solution was put in place, yeah, there'd be initial costs, but some of those costs likely would be recouped when in the future, if this was a 5 or 10 year solution, there would be some residual value on those. So I just thought that would be another piece that council would find interesting.
Thank you. That is very good to know. So just backing up to my question, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't keep the lagoons around for a backup plan, that if we go ahead with this, I'd like to see the complete decommissioning of the lagoons and not have them there as a backup. I think it's just something that the residents have put up with for too long. So very excited and very happy to move this recommendation, Madam Mayor, when it comes to that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have to echo Councillor Crone's comments about being ruined for chocolate milk. As the mum of 3, it's going to be a bit of an issue in my household, but regardless, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Gaffney, I think I'm going to echo the comments of my colleagues in thanking you for a very complete presentation. I guess my question would be about understanding how they need to be, how these units are operated and maintained, and how that training and that expense compares to that of traditional treatment plants.
Okay, thank you for that question. The operations side of the plant is so initially training. We provide at the upfront when we're handing this plan off during the commissioning stage. And then typically an operations company would take that in a private development setting. If there is a municipal environment, sometimes we see the sharing of that operation or completely taking over from the municipality. The cost of operations, if you're looking at it from a private perspective and you outsourced the entire operations of the plant, because it's fully automated, they're designed for not needing intervention within once a week. Someone's checking on it, making sure everything's okay. But these plants are fully automated, fully controlled systems that can be looked at remotely as well. When you're at site, it's really a check-in on everything and make sure pressures are good, flows are good, power's on, that sort of thing. Everything's going well. But from a reporting standpoint, because the Ministry of Environment falls under the ECA guidelines, there's typically a reporting requirement, weekly or biweekly, depending on the flow and the size. And a level 3 operator is typically required as well on the sewage side to operate these plants under the ECA application. From a cost standpoint, it's just a rule of thumb, and it does vary by. So we don't operate. We're not an operations company, but we can recommend a number that we've worked with or that have worked with us in the past. But they typically, as a rule of thumb, I would say anywhere from 12 to 15% of the capital cost to operate, and that would include everything from boots on the ground, someone going in weekly and taking samples, to the electrical costs, to the chemical injection for if you have a very strict phosphorus requirements for discharge and you have some alum, some chemical cleanings for doing the membrane cleanings and that sort of stuff. Anything that would be on some daily just maintenance and repair that you have to do on the plant. Not daily, sorry, but annual maintenance and repair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing anyone else at this time. We have a motion in. Councillor Persicini, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a small question, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
What's the timeline of building all this once we do approve it and get everything going? What is how long would it take to get the whole thing in operational and ready to go?
Yeah, if you asked me this 2 years ago, I would have said about 30 weeks. Now we're probably closer to 45 weeks to 50 weeks based on just the supply chain, global supply chain issues. But
Thank you.
Councillor Roy-Clemente, go ahead.
Thank you. Not questions for Mr. Gaffney at this point, but more just coming back to Mr. Molinari's presentation and our next steps. It's not lost on me that the responsibility for servicing rests with the region and not with us. And so our role here is simply to advocate on behalf of our community and to request that a look be taken. And I had suggested earlier to staff that happy to support the resolution as they've presented it to us, but I thought it would be helpful if we added some whereas clauses up front to give it some context as to where it was coming from, why we were passing that resolution. And I did share that with the clerk in advance, so happy to discuss that further. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we have a look at what the suggestions might be? I guess for me, a next step would be that all members of council and our senior staff see one in operation. I think you'll understand the technology much easier, and seeing is believing in this case. It's a small little building. It's clean. It's quiet. It doesn't smell. It's all of the things that we've been looking for to remove the lagoons. Well, it's 44 years. And I think that when we conclude this presentation and motion today, that the next step should be that all of council go and see and have a really good understanding of exactly what the benefits are of this technology. So with that, I'm not seeing any other questions. There were some.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I do have the prepared resolution with the requested revisions added in blue. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to share a revised resolution for council's consideration incorporating Councillor Roy DeClemente's whereas clauses.
Thank you. Can everyone see it at this point? Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm happy to read it out. I really was just trying to be as succinct as possible and explain the context of the recommendations that were made by staff, and that whereas the town of East Gwillimbury is designated as a growth area under the Places to Grow Act, and whereas the absence of servicing capacity in the town of East Gwillimbury will require that all community development, including housing and employment uses, come to a complete halt. And whereas the town has repeatedly requested that the antiquated sewage lagoons be decommissioned, and whereas the servicing gap urgently requires a creative strategic solution, be it therefore resolved that, and then we move into the recommendations that staff have put forward for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions on the added points? I'm not seeing any. Councillor Roy DeClemente, you have moved.
I know Councillor Carruthers had requested earlier that she,
Okay.
with great enthusiasm, would be happy to move, but I don't know if she wants that as well.
I think every member of council with great enthusiasm would be moving this.
Yes.
It is a group mover and seconder. There's no question about this, unless I'm not reading the tea leaves very well. That it certainly is. it just feels right. I guess from my perspective, it feels right. The timing is right, and we have an obligation to our community to move forward for years to come, and we're not going to be able to do what we expected to do along the way without some changes to our sewage allocation. So I will read this out. Moved by Councillor Crothers and seconded by Councillor Roy DeClemente, whereas the town of East Gwillimbury is designated as a growth area under the Places to Grow Act, and whereas the absence of servicing capacity in the town of East Gwillimbury will require all community development, including housing and employment uses, come to a complete halt, and whereas the town has repeatedly requested that the antiquated sewage lagoons be decommissioned, and whereas the servicing gap urgently requires a creative strategic solution, therefore be it resolved, the community infrastructure and environmental services presentation dated May 3rd, 2022, entitled Growth Management Update, be received, and that council support the use of membrane bioreactor technology or other suitable technology in East Gwillimbury for private sewage and servicing solutions in principle, and that council endorse the concept of an internal treatment plant or other suitable measures which would eliminate the lagoons and provide additional capacity until the Upper York sewage solution is realized, and that staff re-engage the York Region Sewage Act panel and respectfully request that they recommend to the province that the environmental assessment for the Upper York sewage solution or alternative be expedited and approved, and recommend to the province that an interim treatment plant or other suitable interim service solution be approved and commissioned expeditiously to replace the lagoons and bridge the servicing gap to the Upper York sewage solution or alternative.
We have a recorded vote, please.
We have a recorded vote asked for. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just bear with me for a moment. I'm just going to grab our recorded vote sheet. Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Roy DeClemente has requested for a recorded vote. Councillor Roy DeClemente, how do you vote?
Yes.
Wonderful. Councillor Carruthers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Crone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Foster, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Haxon, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Morton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Persuccini, how do you vote?
Great, for sure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That motion's been carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. I think it's a momentous day today for East Gwillimbury to move forward with this. I'm very excited about it, and I am quite sure that we're taking the right steps for our community. Thank you so much to our presenter today. It was a wonderful outline of what you had. Technically was quite amazing, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank our staff, particular Mr. Molinari. You've done an amazing job to bring it forward with us, and thank you to Brad. Appreciate you being with us today. With that, we will move along to the next agenda item, but thank you very much. Wonderful day for East Gwillimbury. With that, I will move along to item number 2, Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services Memo 2021 Waste Diversion Achievements Year-End Report.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the memo provides an update on the town's waste collection program and diversion. The town provides about 140 collections per household for garbage, green bin, blue box, and yard waste at roughly a cost of $120 per household per year. And really, when you do the math on that, it works out to less than $1 per collection for each stream. And we're very proud of our ability to be able to provide that service for such a reasonable price. Also, as part of this 2021 works, a waste audit was completed, which identified that the town is trending with the top-ranking York municipalities for the least amount of recyclables in the garbage. However, higher than others with respect to non-food organics that are in the garbage, which would be more appropriately placed in the green bin. The town's blue box recycling stream is also trending well with about 83% non-contamination, which again is amongst the most favorable results in New York region. Two other programs that we just want to touch on is the single-use battery recycling collection and also the textile recycling programs. The textile recycling program in particular has really been amazing. There's been about 18 tons of textiles diverted through that program in 2021 alone. So just wanted to highlight some of those items for council's information, and happy to answer any questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just want to give a quick shout out and a thanks to our Environmental Advisory Committee who brought the idea of the diabetes textile recycling bins to council, and they're doing a lot of good work with this diversion and with the battery recycling as well. So I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work on this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Are there any other items under this topic?
Nothing further at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Molinari at this time? I'm not seeing any. We will move along to Finance with General Manager Warren Marshall. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of Council. Today, first on our agenda, is we're going to step through the summary of our unaudited operating surplus for 2021. I'm joined by Valerie Adema, our Deputy Treasurer, and we'll be giving you some highlights of our surplus. Just for your information, the external audit is ongoing right now. We have BDO, who's our external auditor. They're right now conducting their field work, and we are planning to bring the audited financial statements to council for approval next month. So before we go into the details of the operating surplus, I'd just like to provide council with an update on the impacts that COVID has had on the town's finances for 2021. So if we can go to the presentation in the second slide. Great, thank you. So for 2021, we've identified approximately $1.5 million of costs or lost revenue associated with the pandemic. The main impact for 2021 was reduced revenues, and in particular for our recreation programs that we couldn't run in 2021. So of the $588,000 that we've identified, about $560,000 was related to the recreation programs and not being able to run those programs. So we were able to offset that loss of revenue in a couple of areas. One, by not hiring as many program and part-time staff, and we experienced some fairly significant savings from our sports complex from it not being available to be operated for the full year. So those were able to offset the reduced revenue that we experienced. We also incurred some additional expenditures of $402,000, mainly in our the additional hardware and software that we were required to continue our remote working environment. We also incurred some additional expenditures through additional PPE and cleaning supplies, and additional hiring of contract staff for the increased screening that was required once our facilities were opened, and some additional cleaning staff as well to support the opening once the province allowed us to open. Those costs were funded mainly from the grant that we received from the province in 2020 and 2021. So finally, we've identified $516,000 worth of staffing costs, and those were related to staff that were either redeployed or dedicated specifically to help the town address the issues related to the pandemic. So we've noted that there's no budgeted impact because those salaries are in our budget, but that staff time had to be allocated towards the pandemic, so they weren't available to do a lot of their regular duties. So in total, that's $1.5 million of impact. In 2020, we identified 2.3 million. So basically, we've been able to effectively offset approximately $4 million of costs related to COVID through various methods. So before I pass it on to Ms. Adema, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the COVID financial impacts.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Marshall? I'm not seeing any at this time. Go ahead, please.
So I'll pass it on to Ms. Adema.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Next slide, please. So what we've summarized in the slides that you'll see before you are just all the information that is in the more detailed report. So this is just for ease of discussion. No new information in the presentation that's outside of the report. In 2021, the tax-supported programs of the town had an unaudited operating surplus of $2.9 million. The items that make up the surplus are detailed in the chart here and in the report. Approximately 34% of this surplus is related to supplementary taxes and impact reassessment and considerations. As we know, supplementary taxes and impact assessment reconsiderations are unpredictable. In 2020, MPAC had a large catch-up of properties remaining to be assessed, which resulted in a large surplus. And as a result, the 2021 budgeted number had been reduced. We do expect that the growth will continue in the upcoming years, so the 2022 budget for supplementary taxes has been increased, so we don't expect to see this level of surplus in the 2022 year end. Within our CIES area, there are various cost savings and program recoveries that contributed to approximately 17% of the surplus total. Included in this category are developer recoveries and additional grant funding related to winter maintenance and waste management. These are temporary in nature, so not included in our operating budget. Salary savings related to various departments in the town included delayed hiring where possible, reduced part-time staff, and gapping between staff transitions. This category makes up approximately 16% of the surplus. Increased fee revenue makes up approximately 13% of this year's surplus. This is reflective of the amount of growth in real estate activity happening within the town, which results in new accounts being set up for tax and water. Penalty and interest on overdue accounts is also included in this category. Various program cost savings and reduced building costs make up approximately 18% of the surplus. While much of this reduced spending is related to COVID, the savings were not required to offset the increased costs of the pandemic, so they end up contributing to the overall surplus. We do not expect to see these cost savings in 2022 as conferences, training courses, building occupancies, and programs are all returning to pre-pandemic levels. Other agencies and municipalities' reduced spending contributes to approximately 5% of the surplus. This relates to radio and pager costs within ECSS, as well as reduced service requirements to other areas, such as cost recoveries in a few of the town departments. Within our mayor and council area, we see reduced spending, making up approximately 3% of the surplus. This is directly related to unspent discretionary engagement funds and reduced events, again, relating to reduced opportunities as a result of the pandemic. While we do see significant reduced spending throughout the town in many areas, it's not to say that the town didn't experience increased costs. There was approximately $195,000 of increased costs or reduced revenues across the town that reduced the surplus amount. Increased costs were related to fleet repairs, software licensing, and bank fees. Reduced revenues were experienced in motor vehicle accidents, which is a good thing when we don't see as many accidents on the road. These costs are being monitored, and if needed, budget adjustments will be reflected in the 2023 budget. Before I move to the next slide, I can take a pause now if you wish to take any questions relating to the items contributing to the tax-supported surplus.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Adema? I'm not seeing any. Go ahead, please.
Okay, next slide, please. Within our water and wastewater area, we have an unaudited surplus amount of about $1.4 million. This surplus is mainly related to increased water volumes from a combination of new growth in the system as well as increased consumption. Approximately 23% of the surplus is related to increased program revenues, which are temporary and unpredictable in nature. We do see program cost savings in this area as well, relating to reduced spending and training, utilities and uniforms, but we do expect these spending levels to return to normal as pandemic restrictions have been lifted. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed allocation of the surplus to the reserve accounts. As detailed in the report, staff propose and calculate the surplus allocation based on 4 main objectives. First, we allocate rate and fee supported operating surplus amounts to their corresponding reserves. Next, reserves with a negative balances, or those that are forecast to be in a negative balance, are topped up. Thirdly, asset replacement reserves are contributed to up to the asset replacement requirements. Finally, although embedded throughout all the other steps, allocations to reserves are made based on the objectives and priorities of council. Staff are proposing the allocation according to what you see on the chart. $50,000 to the election reserve to top up the reserve to align with the cost estimates for the 2022 election. $150,000 to the emergency services reserve relating to some expenditures for capital asset replacements that are exceeding the annual contribution that needs to be funded. $250,000 to the park structures reserve to align with the upcoming capital project requirements. $500,000 to vehicle replacements relating to upcoming replacement plans that are required, as well as the increased cost of vehicles. $470,000 to the IT reserve relating to upcoming project costs in the 10-year capital plan. Finally, $1.5 million to the roads tax levy reserve. We have an upcoming bridge reconstruction of $1.7 million, in addition to upcoming future projects relating to road rehab that we need to ensure we top up that reserve. Next slide, please. For our water and wastewater, surplus has been contributed fully to the infrastructure reserve. Next slide, please. In our development and fee supported areas, we have surpluses or draws that are contributed and drawn directly to their program reserves. In this area, significant increases in revenue from the building, planning, and engineering areas all resulted in either increased contributions in the area of the building reserve or a reduced draw that was required in the areas of planning and engineering. Next slide, please. This slide is in addition to the agenda package that you received for the presentation, over the weekend we had received a question relating to how we fund environmental initiatives. And we just extracted some of the specific reserves out of the reserve schedule, which is Appendix A of the report. We do have the CCC reserve for environmental and watershed enhancements. This is a specific reserve dedicated for environmental initiatives. It is available to fund specific initiatives such as the environmental strategy development. Other reserve accounts that are already established may include funding for environmental components of many projects. For example, the building reserve for asset replacement may be used to fund projects that include components to make our facilities more environmentally friendly or reduce their carbon footprint. Vehicle and equipment replacement reserves include projects such as electrifying the fleet when vehicles reach their end of life and need to be replaced. The roads reserve would include rehab projects such as improving parking lots, ensuring environmental standards are met. Many of the other reserves on the schedule would also include projects that would have environmental considerations. These would be some of the key ones. This concludes our presentation for the morning, so we're happy to take any questions about the presentation or the report.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Roy DiClemente and then Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions. One is just a question of balancing. Our surplus was noted at 2.9 million, but I'm only seeing 2.72 going into reserves. So I'm just wondering where the other 180,000 is.
Might there be an answer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think if we could go to Appendix A on our report, I think what you've seen on the slide is just a snapshot of the asset replacement areas, but there's program-specific contributions of 200,000 that add up to the 2.9.
Thank you. The other question I did have, Madam Mayor, was one of the surpluses related to penalties and interest, and I'm just wondering if staff have noted an increase in that area. I'm just wondering whether that is historically been a similar amount, or whether we're starting to see people who are struggling to pay their bill and are incurring penalties and having to pay interest on either tax bills or water bills. I'm cognizant of what the impact of the pandemic may be having on people's households.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
So maybe I'll take this. Oh, okay. You want it?
Sure. I can take this. So we did track the waiving of penalty and interest that we put in place for anyone who was experiencing financial hardship and had contacted us. We currently only have less than 10 accounts that are still on payment arrangements and on a penalty waiver. We're not necessarily seeing an increase in the amount of accounts that are not paid. However, with the increase in the accounts, we are seeing that exponential growth. So while the percentages are remaining relatively constant, we are seeing an increase in the dollar value.
Thank you. That's helpful. I was just cognizant of $393,000 coming in that we hadn't anticipated as being part of penalties and interest. Thank you.
Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. It was me who asked the question about the climate reserve over the weekend, and I think there was a bit of a disconnect from my question to that last slide that we had. I was specifically asking about the climate reserve that we had talked about at a previous meeting. I know that we put a lot of money aside for different environmental initiatives, and that slide demonstrated that, and that's really, really good to see. But I was specifically asking about putting money aside for climate change, because we know that there's going to be a number of initiatives that we may want to undertake, such as what came forward with the Healthy Active Living Plaza, those initiatives that we were identifying that were outside the the scope of the building that ended up costing more money, but we know will pay back in the long term. And a number of municipalities across Canada have climate reserves where money can be borrowed from it to pay for something like solar panels, for instance, that reduce our energy costs over time. And as those energy costs are reduced, that money can be used to pay back that reserve. So it's sort of a revolving reserve. And that's what we had been talking about a number of meetings ago. And I think that just got blurred into environmental initiatives in general. We know going forward that the cost of climate change is going to be huge for municipalities, whether it's increased storms, so increased storm water capacity, whether it's increased heating costs, which, I mean, we're seeing that. We're seeing increased costs for our vehicles. So electric vehicles are going to become more important to bring costs down for operating those vehicles. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to be looking for more innovative solutions, or costs will get out of control. I shared a report from SCM that speaks to the cost of climate change for municipalities going forward. And I'd like to reopen the discussion around having a specific reserve that can be used for things that crop up that are unanticipated, but we know are going to be happening as we hit this next emergency. We did a good job dealing with the COVID emergency. Climate change is going to be the next emergency, and starting to put some funds aside for that so that we can do the things that need to be done to help mitigate the impact of climate change on East Gwillimbury. I think it is a very smart move to start putting away a little bit of money now to get some things done. So I'd like to maybe we can hear from Mr. Webster because it was him I was talking to about this weekend.
I see Mr. Webster there. Go ahead.
I think the councillor makes some excellent points as usual. We did talk about this at the reserve workshop, and I circulated the email and the FCM content to the leadership team. I think the leadership team wanted to point out that there were areas where we are starting to build some environmental initiatives funds, but clearly not to the level that the councillor is projecting. We do have a position that we're currently recruiting for that will help scope our initiatives and our programs, and I would suggest it would be supportable to possibly establish a reserve for this and get some seed money in there. And you know, we seem to be putting a lot into the roads network, and I think an amount even like $100,000, it's $100,000 more than zero, and we're pretty proud of our reserve balances. And as you recall from the workshop, we're in a pretty enviable spot with respect to our reserves per capita. And this job this year of the 4 million plus minus 4 million being able to go into reserve, I think that could be something that council could support, and it would maybe allow us to start building some momentum in an environmental change reserve where we could scope that out and work towards building a much more robust reserve as we continue to move along. So that would be a proposal. I will put that back to Councillor Crothers as maybe she could ask her colleagues to support that. And I'm sure that our finance folks could find an amount such as that to establish this reserve and start putting it in as one of our discretionary reserves, but an important one at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I really appreciate that. And Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move a motion to that effect. I would defer to staff on defining exactly what the reserve can be used for. I'm not sure exactly how much description they need with it, but I'm happy to move that we look at establishing a climate reserve to the tune of about $100,000 starting as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second that as well. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to set aside some money for any sort of environmental initiative we might have. I always challenge, certainly myself as a councillor, I don't think we do nearly enough to support the environment. I know we do a lot of good things, but, you know, we should always be doing more. So happy to second that. I do have a question, though, regarding the presentation, and through you, Madam Mayor, to staff. This really, I probably should have asked this back when we did our presentation a few meetings back on reserving, but I was just curious. You know, we're very fortunate to be in the financial position that we are in. We're blessed, and we have reserves set aside, and we have surpluses, and that's, you know, we're in a very envious position, I know. I was just curious, though, the money is invested, and it's sitting there, and we're earning interest on it and on those reserves. Where does the interest go from those reserves? Does it get allocated back to the reserve itself? Does it go into general coffers? I was just curious, where does all that good money interest go that we're earning on our reserves?
Mr. Marshall?
So through you, Madam Mayor, the Municipal Act actually dictates what we can do with that interest, and it has to go back to the reserves that we invested that made that money. So we've put in, actually up to this point now, we've invested close to $100 million of our reserve funding into investments, and that interest is going back into those reserves, and they get allocated through those reserves.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I think this is a terrific idea. We can do it. We are in that advantage of other municipalities for sure. I'd also like to, when we deal with this motion itself, think about having some kind of a workshop. I know that there are municipalities right across Canada that have run into environmental problems that as far as a municipalities have not been able to deal with their environmental issues. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from some of these municipalities on what they have done now, or those that have been able to deal with the environmental impacts and how they've come out a much better community for it. So I just think that a workshop, I'm not referring to a full day or a half day, perhaps an hour and a half, that we can see what else is out there and how other municipalities have dealt with this as well. Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Just related to the addition of the environmental reserve, I know that we are in the midst of recruiting an individual, and when that individual arrives, I would hate for them to think that they arrive here and they ask the question and they're told, well, there's $100,000 in this account that you have to spend on initiatives. I would rather have the message say that we have 10 million in reserves between our general capital and our working capital and tax stabilization reserves, and that's what you have to work with. And so from my perspective, I would prefer to wait until that individual is here and reports out on some of their findings before we start to nickel and dime them on any initiatives and what they might have available to them to work on. Thanks.
Thank you. Comments from staff? Not seeing any at this time. Mr. Marshall, any comments to Councillor Roy DeClemente's observations?
Yeah, sure. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, definitely the general capital reserve is available for initiatives that we have not specified in budget, so it's available for other initiatives. I think it is a good idea to have the person coming in start to identify areas that we do need to start putting expenditures towards, and developing a plan that not only includes the general capital reserve, but some other potential funding sources that could be used. So yes, I'm in agreement with the councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think the intention is to get started so that when this person comes on board, if there's expenses that are related to establishing our climate action plan, that there is some money that's already set aside for that. I don't think, to Councillor Roy Clemente's statement, that they would see it as money that they have to spend on environmental initiatives. It is a reserve for when things come up. If you remember back when the Environment Committee brought forward the idea about looking at making the HELP net zero, we didn't have money to go to for that consultant that would give us that information that we needed. There wasn't a place to get that. And so staff had to scramble to come up with the money for that. And then each of the initiatives that we wanted to put in place, again, we were looking at where is that going to be funded from. So I think to Mr. Webster's point, $100,000 to start, it's basically it's seed money. So as we grow our climate action plan, there is a start. And when we have the new individual on board and they have a plan that we adopt, we'll know exactly how much we need to grow that reserve by. But at this time, I think it's prudent just to get it started. As the mayor says, there's a number of municipalities across Canada that have dealt with the climate crisis in a variety of different ways. Having taken this FCM course recently on climate change, one of the things that is strongly recommended is to start a climate reserve as soon as possible. It's a little bit like your RSP, right? If you started in your 20s, you only have to put a little bit away at a time. If you wait until you're in your 50s, you're suddenly in trouble. Well, the climate crisis has been put on hold for the last 2 years because of COVID, and we're going to start seeing some real expenses mounting for us. And I think it's prudent just to start with the $100,000 that Mr. Webster had indicated, and then wait for the report once we get this new staff member on board to see what that reserve would need to grow to meet our the necessary mitigation efforts that we're going to have to undertake as a town.
Thank you. Comments, questions? I'm not seeing any. We have a number of points here in front of us regarding the reports that have been presented by staff this morning. I'm wondering if the $100,000 for climate change should be a separate motion outside of the ones that we have here regarding the reports that the staff have brought to us. And I'm just wondering, could I have a mover and a seconder? Mr. Webster has certainly indicated that $100,000 is a good start, and I think listening to members of council, everyone seems to be in agreement with that. So if I could have a mover and seconder, and we'll deal with the $100,000 for climate initiatives first, and then I'll go back to the prepared agenda with the number of points that we have for finances. So Councillor Crone, would you move that? Thank you. And seconder? Oh, Councillor Morton, thank you. Any questions on this? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm going back to my prepared agenda.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Morton, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay. It's just a little hand today. I had the opportunity actually of talking with Mr. Marshall last night, and I would like to thank Ms. Adema and Mr. Marshall for all the work that they have done while many of us were maybe sitting at home and everything else. And they've done a great job, as always, and I'd like to ensure that we are recognizing that.
Thank you very much. Very skilled people in our finance department. Not that others aren't, but when handling public money, it's always an interesting position to be in. So thank you very much to both of you, and I know that you are supported yourselves by other members of staff as well, so please thank them very much for us. I have a motion I have item number 2 on our finance is written on our agenda. Does everyone have it in front? If I don't, I can read it out. There we go. Could I have a mover and a seconder for our 1, 2, 3, 4 areas? Councillor Roy DiClemente, and seconded by Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm just looking here. Finance report, statement of development charge reserve. Any questions on that portion of finance? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover? Councillor Roy DiClemente, you have a question, and then you'll move it.
Happy to move it.
Thank you.
I don't know if staff had any comments to make to present it,
Yes.
but on table 3, I did note that there was an additional credit, the Sharon Village Landowners Group, and then there's Sharon West Landowners Group, and it looks like there may have been an overpayment of $15,000, but I just would look for a bit of interpretation from staff on that.
Thank you.
Please
Staff.
and thank you.
Thank you. Staff, could you talk to that item, please?
Yeah, sure. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, there was a bit of an over credit on that, but it was what has happened is we based our credit agreements based on estimates, and the estimate has come in, and there's a phase 2 that is of the construction that is going to happen that will be bringing those costs over that $15,000 credit that we've provided. So next year, if you see this table again next year, you'll see that we've gotten rid of that over credit, and they'll actually be owed additional credits. So it's kind of a timing difference that has gone over the 2 years.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Thank you. You'll move that? Thank you. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Foster, was that your hand up? Thank you very much. All those in favor? And that's carried. Now we'll just check and see if there's anything else under finance that should be dealt with today.
We have nothing further, Madam
Mr.
Mayor.
Marshall, do we have anything else to be dealt with today?
No, there's nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the clock here, and it is 12:07. I'm noting that we still have quite a bit of agenda left, and I'm wondering if we can do the corporate services. It appears that there is one report, and then we would take a break after that. Sorry, there's 2 reports. And then we would take a break and come back after lunch to Community Parks, Recreation, and Culture. I'm seeing nods here in the council chamber. I'll see if I have nods as well on the screen. So with that, we'll move to item K, and that's corporate services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the interest of time, I would suggest to you the report is well-written and self-explanatory. It's related to a very important capital project that Council has already approved. And this is looking to award make an award to the supplier of the customer relationship management software. Ms. Gandhi and the director is leading this initiative and is available if there are any questions, and would be happy to provide more information and context.
Thank you very much. Questions regarding our corporate services customer relation management software contract? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to staff. Just want to say I'm very supportive of this initiative. I think it's important for us to have the software. It's certainly going to help us in our evolution to a resident-centric culture of customer service. So I think this, and it helps us mine some data with issues that are coming to the town, so we can be more responsive in the future. I am curious about the tender process, though, because I understand there were about 15 companies that were qualified to submit a proposal to the town. We only had 3 that come through, and we ended up, one really only cleared the hurdles to be considered. So I'm just curious, do we need to change our tendering process to get more people to comment? So I'm concerned that we didn't get a better selection of choices, and that it might have limited our ability to make the best possible decision. So should we have tendered longer? Is there any other concerns out there that maybe we could have done this differently to get more tenders submitted? Just curious.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I would suggest that in terms of the tendering process, that we had it posted on our bids and tenders system for several weeks, in fact. And I believe that it was extended as well. In terms of the process, I'm not the subject matter expert on the bidding and tendering process, and that question might be better directed to our treasurer, or we can come back to you with a more fulsome report on that process.
Councillor Crone, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, if the treasurer wants to comment, I'm happy to listen. Otherwise, happy to hear back from staff at a later date.
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, I can comment quickly, but we can also come back. The process that we use is a process that's fairly consistent through most municipalities. We advertise our bids on our website and through our bids and tenders process, which is accessible to anyone who wants to have an account with us. I think part of the issue with the number of people that we get are, one, the demand that's out there. I know there's several municipalities that are looking for systems, so whether the companies have enough capacity to actually bid on some things, and some of our requirements as well. So so that all factors into it, but so I can leave that as a starting comment, but if you'd like, we can come back with some further analysis for you.
I have some other questions, so we'll determine what the outcome might be after I hear from other speakers. Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have 2 questions, and one of my questions was very similar to Councillor Crone's, and that was ultimately not so much a question about the process, but if we only had one bidder, how do we know that, as the report notes, that the pricing is competitive, fair, and reasonable? And that would be how I would phrase that question, and not so much the process, because I know we followed the proper process, but how do we know the price is right?
So through you, Madam Mayor, we did interview 3 of the proponents and found that 2 did not meet the required qualifications as we had intended. And then we opened up the other bid. I do know from past experience in implementing a CRM and in another municipality that the pricing was competitive. And our budget initially had been established based on what we anticipated the price to be. So the actual price of the contract, or the amount that was provided to us by the supplier, was in fact quite a lot lower than what we had expected. And so that's why we believe that the amount is consistent with what we anticipated the pricing would be.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. That certainly makes sense, Madam Mayor. And then further, my second question was just requiring a little bit of clarification. The contract is in the amount of 182,000, and the resolution here notes that there's funding of 150 through the province and then 150 through reserves. So it's overfunded. So even if I include the annual licensing fee, I'm at 249,000, not 300,000. So I'm just wondering how that's working. The numbers don't
So
add up
some
for
of the,
me.
so through you, Madam Mayor, the funding for 182, 388 and 22 cents is for the full contract amount. When we're implementing a project of this type, it's really important to bring staff involved in the process and to directly have them involved in the project management of this. So that's exactly the approach that we're taking. When we bring people offline of their regular tasks, we need to backfill those roles. And so we are using that approach to utilize some of the balance of the budget for this project.
So through you, Madam Mayor, what we're proposing to do is spend $182,000 on the contract and then another $51,000 on staff who are being seconded to the project.
That's an approximate amount, through you, Madam Mayor, that's an approximate amount. So for example, the manager of customer service has been working on this project almost on a full-time basis, and going forward, a person will be involved in assisting in customer service so we don't reduce service levels while that manager is directly involved in the project. And so we're anticipating over the period of this contract that it could be almost a full-time salary, and so that 51,000 would be accounted for that.
Thank you. I think it would have been helpful to have that laid out for us in the report. It wasn't clear to me when I was reading it that that was the activity that we were taking place, that this was an operational question as well as a capital expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gandy, any other comments at this time?
I do not have any other comments.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions on this item? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone. Councillor Morton. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And we have a second item regarding the changing of the open house that is, I believe has somewhat been advertised, but I'm not sure to what extent. Mr. Valchik, could you shed some light on this one, please?
Can do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're looking to have council formalize the date of May 26th for the community open house, just so as not to conflict with the provincial election date of June 2nd, just to make sure that we maximize the opportunity for our community residents to participate in the community open house.
Thank you. That makes sense. We have a lot of people that actually work the elections too, I think. So that's important that they have the ability to come out to the open house. I'm not seeing any questions. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Valchik, do we have anything else under corporate services at this time?
Nothing further. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Members of council, anything for corporate services at this point? I'm not seeing any. So with that, we will take a break. I'm looking at the clock at 12:18. Might I suggest 1:15? And to be back, I know that we still have a fairly extensive agenda to complete, so I'm hoping that that will give us a break right now, and then time to make sure that we have the right amount of time for the items that are still in front of us. With that, we'll take a break. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Municipal Council meeting. We are at item L in our agenda for Community Parks, Recreation, and Culture. And I would ask Mr. Karmazin, our General Manager, to walk us through this report.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. This is a report that is recommending an award of contract for a design concept for the Civic precinct. The enhancement and the expansion of the precinct is fully funded through our development charges. And as an integral part of this process, we will be including a comprehensive public outreach, conducting outreach to local businesses, residents, and community stakeholders, for example, the Sharon Temple. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I don't mean to open up a sore spot here, but will this finally deal with what may or may not happen with the silo? Whether you're for it or against it, or have been for it or against it for all these years, it still sits there with a fence around it. I heard some rumors about a possibility of a roof structure that might be going on there to make that usable. I just wonder if there's an update or if there is anything specific within this report that might speak to that.
Mr. Karmazin?
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing specific to this report. However, I can say that we will certainly take it into consideration as far as the design exercise and how to incorporate or integrate the silo into any form of a concept. We had done back in the day, this was several years ago, a heritage study on the silo, and it was deemed that that masonry was of historical significance for the type of masonry for that period in the early 1900s. So we will, as a structure with some heritage significance, we will certainly look at the silo and how it may integrate into the plans and the concepts that we prepare.
Thank you. Councillor Persicini, go ahead, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I kind of bounced things off last time we talked about this before, that since it's a heritage thing, maybe we should have all the way around some history about the heritage of East Gwillimbury, different, so people can look when they walk around. There's all kinds of things that did happen in East Gwillimbury, and the dates and some plaques of, we can create some nice good colors around it, so we can put people who started things in East Gwillimbury, all history of all East Gwillimbury could go all around the silo, so we can utilize it for something like a showpiece. It's just an idea. We talked about it, and then we haven't talked about it. I'm glad that you brought it back up again to talk about it. So that was some thoughts in it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Karmazin, when you get to a certain point, will there be an opportunity for members of council to have input into the project?
Through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. We always try to include council with any of our design charrettes or exercises to inform the design. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I guess I am remiss. We also have residents in our community that have been here since the day they were born. And if we're going to make this a heritage area, then perhaps somehow we would be meeting with our general public, and particularly those folks who've been here forever, to see what kind of ideas they might have. I know that the temple looks after a lot of the heritage for East Gwillimbury, but there are people here who are walking encyclopedias for East Gwillimbury. They were born and raised here, and they're seniors here now. I'm sure Councillor Foster knows some of those as well, probably some of your relatives, but there are a number of people that I've come across over the last 20 years or so that have been here since day one, and they're well into their years now and have a lot to offer. So if we can kind of think about that, I think it would be interesting, and we could certainly log some of the information that we do receive from I'm going to call them the pioneers. Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Roy DiClemente, seconded by Councillor Pertzacchini. All those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Karmazin, anything else under Community Parks, Recreation and Culture?
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Karmazin at this time? I'm not seeing any. We'll move along to item M, and that's Emergency and Community Safety Services. We have no reports at this time, but our chief is with us. Good
Thank you, Your
afternoon.
Honor. Yes, nothing on the agenda, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for the chief? I'm not seeing any. I'm assuming everything's going quite well with our emergency services. I see them out quite regularly, and I know that the community are very pleased to have the important people on that truck every time it goes out the door. So thank you very much. And we'll move along if there's no other. Thank you for being with us. Item M is Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first item from Development Services is a memo to inform council that staff has granted the Averton development in Mount Albert a building permit extension for the mixed-use building for a maximum of 6 months. The building permit was originally issued in November of 2021 and is set to expire on May 8, 2022. I believe the memo has an attached explanation of the delays as well as a detailed building plan of how we move forward with the mixed-use building, which indicates that they will be doing framing by the end of August. So in good faith, staff has granted an extension of 6 months to the applicant's building permit for the mixed-use building. Happy to answer any questions here.
Thank you very much. I'm quite sure that the residents will be happy to see that. Questions? Councillor Morton, go ahead, please.
No question, Madam Mayor, but I know that I have heard a number of people that have already paid money to go into that area. And so I'm hoping that we can get this done and on the way before very long, because it's been long enough now to have it, and that people are wondering why, especially the ones that have put the money into it already. So,
thank you. Perhaps Lawrence, you could talk with Councillor Morton to see if there's anything that she can share with the community as she's talking to people, and I would say Councillor Crone as well, just to give people a heads up. It should be a good news story, but unfortunately it's taken a bit of a negative just with the timing of it. So perhaps our two members of council who represent Mount Albert could be available to, or have more information just to share with the community as well.
Sure, I can provide that.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the way that this memorandum was worded is that there was a request. So it is now, since this memo was written, the request has now been granted. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if you could help me understand sort of the timelines. Did we issue a building permit for the townhouses at the same time as we issued a permit for this mixed-use building?
It's my understanding, yes, it's about the same time frame. That's correct.
And I guess further, if I may, Madam Mayor, if I recall correctly, the terms of the agreement with this developer is that they are to deliver the mixed-use building, this commercial building, first, before the townhouses.
That's correct. Yes, it was written in the site plan agreement. When we executed the site plan agreement, it detailed the priorities of the phasing of the development, which included the mixed-use building as the first priority.
So then it would be, to Councillor Morton's point, that there are people who are waiting for their residential home to be built, that the delays in this mixed use are going to also impact occupancy for those townhomes. So obviously, I support extending the permit, but I guess the best point that Councillor Morton made was we need this to hurry up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to add to the comments of my colleagues here. I think it's in everyone's best interest if we can speed this project along. I know I have great sympathy for the builder and what's going on with the supply chains right now. I know that's things that are beyond their control, but I have even more sympathy, though, for the neighbors that have to put up with the construction that's been around them. It's gone on for quite some time. So anything we can do to help expedite that, I think, would be a good thing. I would just, Mr. Cook, if you could reinforce with the developer to be respectful of the construction times when that's allowed. We've had some complaints. I know some fines have been issued about noise bylaws and operating outside of the hours that they should be. So we need to reinforce that they are good neighbors on that construction site. But I do support the extension of the permit and want to help them get completed as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you move that motion at this time? Thank you. Councillor Morton, would you second that? Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. Second item on development services we have is driving instructors' traffic concerns.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The next memo is from bylaw to update council on a Metrolink lease agreement for a temporary drive test location at the GO station. The lease agreement is set to expire at the end of May of this year. And to alleviate traffic concerns during the lease period, drive tests will avoid using the residential area for testing. Jennifer from bylaw is here if any questions may arise from council.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions for Jennifer? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
More just a comment, and that's to thank staff for doing this research for us and for assisting with this. I know the community is seeing, there's some people who actually are putting pylons out on the road in front of their homes because it's so disruptive. So I'm happy to hear that there are some steps being taken to address this, and I look forward to Ms. Nichols' report on whether there's a licensing opportunity for enhanced revenue for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Roy DeClemente, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 3 is a wildlife service.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The last item for development services is from bylaw once again, and it's to provide council with options to consider with regards to the numerous reports of injured wildlife and wildlife sighting in town. Once again, Jennifer Nichols from Bylaw Services is here to provide additional information. So I'll turn it to Jennifer for now.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This report is to do with options for wildlife services. As growth continues in East Gwillimbury, we've continued to see pressures from residents with increased service expectations surrounding wildlife. In response to that, a communication plan was developed in regards to the coyotes and wildlife and posted on the town website and social media to provide further information on how to prevent and manage conflict with wildlife. Staff have identified 2 potential options that provide for the removal of large injured wildlife. Our current service provider does have an agreement that accounts for the removal of small injured wildlife, such as skunks and raccoons, rabbits, that sort of thing. He has agreed to remove large injured wildlife provided that they are contained. So what that would require is us to rely on Shades of Hope to provide a trap, and the property owner ultimately monitoring the trap and containing the animal until animal services can remove. Alternatively, staff are recommending the second option, and that is to enter into a partnership with the town of Aurora as a pilot project to provide for the removal of all injured wildlife in the town. This pilot project would run from May 1st to October 31st. And after that, staff would evaluate the effectiveness of the service and report back. In addition to that, as part of the review of the wildlife services, staff did contact Shades of Hope Wildlife Refuge, who has indicated that there has been a 20% increase in wildlife from East Gwillimbury at a yearly basis of 20% increase. As a result of that, to facilitate the wildlife intakes, Shade of Hope is requesting the town enter an agreement which would include an annual fee of $7,000 to assist in recovering costs to treat and rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife with the goal of releasing healthy animals back into the natural habitat. Of course, happy to answer any questions that council has.
I've read this very carefully. I've watched what has taken place in other municipalities as well. We are a high-growth community. We probably, if it's a surprise, it shouldn't be that we have injured wildlife in our community, regardless of the amount of green that we have and the amount of area that these animals have to live in. Cars are on the road, and more cars now in East Gwillimbury than ever before. I think we have a moral obligation to spend this money and make sure that our wildlife is looked after, particularly if they have been injured and they're suffering. I believe we have an obligation to look after them, and if we can come up with some ideas about areas, we certainly, I think all of us know that there are places where wildlife cross the road in an area where we all live, that perhaps to take a look and see if there's a way of changing their pattern a little bit to keep them within the area. 83% green, but they have roads in between those green places, and unfortunately there are far too many that to succumb to it. So that's just my personal opinion. I'm not sure how other people feel about it. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say I share your opinion. You know, the wildlife is not encroaching on our land, we're encroaching on theirs. And personally, I hate to see any domestic or wildlife, any animals suffer. So I would support anything we can do to help with these poor creatures. So I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see that this is being brought forward since this was something that had come out of residents who raised this issue with us, and so it's very responsive of us. I just wanted to clarify that this is the agreement and the options are for injured wildlife. It's not for the fox that was sauntering across the road this morning on my way to drive the kids to school. This is for injured wildlife only, correct?
That's my understanding, yeah. Jennifer?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. It would be for injured wildlife only.
Thank you.
Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and I echo the comments of my colleagues that this is much needed and appreciated. So thank you for this report. I also wanted just to reiterate what has been discussed when we're looking at our official plan about wildlife corridors. We'll see more and more animals injured, and to the mayor's comments about they're crossing the roads in certain places and that. And I think that we can minimize that through our official plan by making sure that there is corridors for them to go through, so they're not crossing every road everywhere. So I think there's more work we can do to help wildlife, but this is a wonderful way to help, especially Shades of Hope has been so wonderful. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Persicini, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. I do not see any other items on this area now. Might there be anything else, Mr. Cook?
Nothing further from Development Services, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll move along then to Legal Services. I note that there are no items on the agenda. However, our solicitor, Mr. Sinclair, is there in front of us, so I'm welcome. Good to see you, and wonder if you have anything for us that we don't have on our agenda.
I'm happy to report that I don't have anything more for you at this time, but thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Good to see you, Don. Good to have you with us. I'm not sure whether there might be some questions from members of council. Are there questions for our solicitor at this time? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I'd like to circle back to the Averton issue. And I'm wondering what sorts of repercussions, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Sinclair, what sort of repercussions there are if they do not adhere to the principles as agreed to in the site plan?
Well, Madam Mayor, I would have to read that site plan agreement, so I can't give a full answer at this time, but we'll look at that. I know that the Averton issue has been around for a long, long time, and we'll do what we can when asked.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Mr. Sinclair, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll move along in our agenda.
Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. We are now at correspondence for consideration, and the first one we have is correspondence from T-WEG, Co-Chair 2022 Mount Albert Sports Day and Spring Fair Committee dated April 25th, 2022 regarding the 100th annual Mount Albert Sports Day and Spring Fair. Imagine that. We have in front of us a resolution. I could read it out, or if people would like to read it, whatever we work. Councillor Persicini, go ahead, please.
I'll move it, but I just wanted to let you know that they don't know that Fernando is no longer with us. This was addressed to Fernando Lamanas.
Thank you.
Just the notice.
Yes, thank you very much.
And I'll move it whenever, if everybody's okay with it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crone. Not seeing any questions. All those in favor? That's carried. Big weekend. I'm sure everybody has it marked in their calendar already. If you don't, you need to be there. It's very important.
And our mayor will be speaking.
And apparently I will be speaking. I would think, as long as I've been on council, I'm not sure that I've ever missed a sports day. I haven't. It's such a wonderful way to get community together. Item number 2 on this area is correspondence from KLM Planning Partners. And I wonder If we can just have a look at that. Mr. Webster, go ahead, please.
I can provide a little background to this. What's happened essentially is our first large phase of growth occurring primarily in Hall Landing, Sharon, and Queensville in the urbanized area. And as Mount Albert is separately serviced, was funded largely by the builders and developers that are building the homes. And we have 1,000 units left in reserve. And I think the request that came to council I don't even know if it was a request, but there was a note in a recent memo update with regard to moving the Howard House, and that the price of it was starting to approach $2 million. And the entity that was moving the house was looking for some residential allocation from that reserve. And so we've had a series of these letters from the initial funders expressing significant concern to that. We did have a meeting with the groups this week, both from some of the Temple folks, primarily represented by Don Sinclair, who was wearing his hat as board member, and the developer. And it appears that the request for the residential allocation will be set aside this time. And so they'll, that's good news, I think. They'll be able to focus on getting their non-residential and office development up and running. And we'll be bringing a further update to council regarding that and as well. So I would suggest that these letters be referred to staff, and that we do subsequent reports to council about relocating the Howard House, and for the site plan approvals and other planning approvals needed for the commercial development at the northwest corner of Green Lane and Second Concession to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Questions? I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Persicini and Councillor Roy DiClemente. All those in favor? And that's carried. Now, I'm just wondering, do we have anything else at this time in this area? I'm not seeing any. We'll move along to item Q. There are no reports at this time. And item R, no resolutions. We are now down to S, and that would be bylaws. And we have 3 bylaws at this time. Are there any questions on the 3 bylaws? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Foster and Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that is carried. And we are at item T. Do we have any other business at this time? I'm not seeing any. We will move to our confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-040, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council meeting held on May 3rd, 2022, be taken as read and acted and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Persicini, Councillor Morton, all those in favor, and that is carried. And an adjournment at this time at 1:49, moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Roy DiClemente. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground today. I appreciate all of your support and patience. It's been a long day, and we've covered some very good items. So have a great rest of the day. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Everybody have a great day too.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye now.
Bye.